A stone is dropped into a dark well. You stand at the edge, leaning over the abyss, waiting for the splash. 1 second passes, then 10, then 1,000. No sound returns. What does the human mind do when it encounters an absolute void? It builds. It constructs empires out of empty space. It writes grand tragedies, calculates hidden betrayals, and drafts elaborate, invisible confessions of love, all from a single, unbroken thread of nothingness. He stepped back. He retreated into a fortress where the drawbridge is permanently raised and the windows are blacked out. And so the translation begins. You measure the exact weight of his absence. You calculate the geometry of his distant gaze. You become a brilliant, tragic scholar of ghosts, attempting to decipher a language made entirely of missing words. But what if the void is not a riddle waiting for your intellect to solve it? What if the quiet is not a weapon? What if it is not a calculated rejection? And certainly not a secret, paralyzed declaration of eternal devotion. Today, we are going to walk through the architecture of the unsaid. We are going to examine the masculine withdrawal through the analytical depth of Carl Jung, the mechanics of the human nervous system, and the quiet, uncomfortable truth of the avoidant soul. It is time to put down the magnifying glass. Let us look at what is actually there. To understand the silence, we must first understand the psychological structure that enforces it. When the space between you goes quiet, the mind instantly assumes malice. It feels like a calculated punishment. It feels like a weapon forged specifically to break your spirit. But this is an illusion born of your own deep capacity to feel. We must step out of the emotional storm and look at the cold, hard architecture of the masculine psyche. We must look at what happens when a human being is pushed beyond their internal limits. In the framework of Jungian psychology, the human mind is fiercely divided. We all carry a persona. The persona is the polished, armored mask we wear to survive the world. It is the resume we hand to society. For the masculine archetype, society constructs a very specific, very rigid persona. It demands absolute competence. It requires unwavering emotional stoicism. It dictates that he must be the unbending pillar. He must never be the leaning wall. He is taught from a very young age that his value is tied entirely to his utility and his unshakable strength. But beneath the floorboards of this rigid persona lies the shadow. The shadow is the damp, lightless basement of the psyche. It is where we lock away everything we are afraid to be. Within the shadow of the masculine lies what Carl Jung called the anima. The anima is his unconscious feminine side. This is the realm of feeling. It is the realm of intuition, grief, vulnerability, and deep emotional resonance. For the unawakened counterpart, this realm is not a beautiful sanctuary. It is a terrifying, uncharted wilderness. It is a place where his armor does not work. When you bring emotional depth to the connection, a profound psychological event occurs. You, as the holder of space, are not just asking for a simple conversation. You are unknowingly acting as a mirror to his anima. You reflect the very depths he has spent a lifetime avoiding. You are asking him to step out of the impenetrable fortress of his persona. You are asking him to walk naked into his own shadow. You want him to meet you in the deep water, but you do not realize he has spent his entire life building walls to keep the water out. When a man encounters an emotional depth he lacks the internal architecture to navigate, his body reacts. His nervous system perceives a lethal threat. This is where psychology meets biology. His withdrawal is not a conscious, malicious choice. It is a biological and psychological lockdown. It is what trauma specialists call a dorsal vagal shutdown. The human nervous system has finite responses to overwhelming danger. It can fight, it can flee, or it can freeze. When the emotional demand exceeds his somatic capacity, his system chooses the freeze. It cuts the power to the entire building to prevent a catastrophic fire. The silence you hear is the sound of the breakers tripping. The lights go out, the doors lock, the drawbridge is raised. He does not disappear because he feels nothing. He disappears because he lacks the somatic container to process the sheer magnitude of what he is feeling. The system simply crashes. And what governs this massive involuntary shutdown? What lives in the darkest corner of the unintegrated masculine shadow? It is shame. It is a profound, agonizing shame of inadequacy. It is the terror that if he speaks, he will reveal his incompetence to you. He fears that if he allows himself to feel, he will drown in the undertow of his own suppressed grief. He believes that if he opens the door even a fraction, the wind will blow down his entire house. His silence is a desperate attempt to maintain his structural integrity. Through the universal law of mirroring, quantum entanglement shows us the physics of this dynamic. Two bodies in deep connection inevitably reflect each other's most dominant frequencies. You feel his sudden withdrawal as a violent magnetic pull. The anxious heart naturally leans forward. You become desperate for a signal. You search for a word, a breadcrumb of reassurance, a sign of life. You want to fix the disconnect, but your leaning forward is precisely the pressure that triggers his leaning back. To a dysregulated nervous system, your gentle emotional inquiry does not feel like love. It feels like a blazing spotlight interrogating a fugitive. The more you pursue clarity, the more deeply he retreats into the dark. Your desire for connection registers as a demand for a capacity he does not possess. This is the tragic paradox of the dynamic. You are asking him to be brave in a language he does not speak. You are asking him to navigate a terrain where he has no map. The void he leaves behind is not an empty space waiting to be filled with your love. It is a boundary drawn by his own limitations. His silence is not an attack on your worth. It is a silent confession of his own profound fear. Here is the shift. This is the pivot that changes everything. We must fundamentally alter how we interact with the empty space. We must stop treating his silence as a complex mystery waiting to be solved. We must stop acting as detectives, frantically searching for clues in a barren room. It is time to step back. We must begin treating his withdrawal as pure, neutral data. It is not a riddle. It is not a secret code. It is an observable fact. We must simply watch it without trying to change it. The human mind despises a vacuum. When confronted with nothingness, it rushes to fill the void with stories. The anxious heart writes endless scripts to explain his absence. You analyze his past traumas. You dissect his childhood wounds. You become an unpaid therapist for a man who has not asked for healing. But this relentless analysis is just another form of control. It is a way to avoid feeling the raw, uncomfortable truth of his physical and emotional absence. When you shift your perspective to view his silence as neutral data, you drop the illusion of control. You step out of the exhaustion of interpretation. When the unawakened counterpart goes quiet, he is actually giving you an answer. He is giving you the most honest, authentic response he is currently capable of giving. He is handing you his exact coordinates on the map of human consciousness. His silence is not a withholding of his greatness. His silence is his absolute capacity. It is the highest ceiling of his emotional availability in this exact moment. He has reached the end of his internal map. There is nothing left for him to give. The ego of the anxious heart desperately wants to make this absence personal. You have been conditioned to believe that if you were simply better, he would stay. You tell yourself that if you were more patient, more understanding, or more beautiful, he would finally speak. But his silence is not a reflection of your worth. It has never been a measure of your value. It is solely a reflection of his own emotional ceiling. It is a mirror of his internal limitations. Imagine a vast, deep ocean. This ocean represents the profound depths of emotional and spiritual intimacy. You are the holder of space. You know these waters well. You swim effortlessly in the deep end. You understand the currents of vulnerability. You call out to him from the water. You tell him the water is beautiful. You tell him it is safe here. You invite him to leave the dry, rigid land of his persona. You ask him to come meet you in the deep. He stands on the shore. He looks at the vastness of the water. He sees the terrifying, unpredictable waves of real connection. He looks at you floating so freely, and then he turns his back. He walks away into the arid desert of his own isolation. He says absolutely nothing. What does your mind do in this moment? Do you tell yourself he walked away because you are not worthy of his effort? Do you convince yourself he harbors a secret hatred for the ocean? Do you write a tragic, romantic narrative that he is simply waiting for the perfect tide? Do you believe he is going to build a magnificent ship and sail out to you tomorrow? We must accept the stark, unromantic, grounding truth. He simply does not know how to swim. He is terrified of the water. He is immobilized by the shame of his own incapacity. He would rather walk away in absolute silence than stand on the shore and confess that he is afraid of drowning. His departure is a mechanism of survival. It is not a judgment of the ocean. This agony you feel is not a cosmic punishment. It is not a sign that you have failed in your spiritual work. It is a profound, albeit deeply painful invitation. It is an invitation for your own spiritual expansion. The universe is using the heavy gravity of his silence to force you to plant your own feet firmly on the earth. It is demanding that you anchor yourself in reality. You are being asked to master the highest, most difficult discipline of all. You must learn to allow reality to be exactly what it is. You must stop decorating his silence with potential. As spiritually attuned beings, we often fall in love with what a soul could be. We see their divine blueprint. We see the magnificent architecture of their higher self, but we ignore the frightened human standing right in front of us. His silence is breaking your addiction to potential. It is shattering the spiritual illusion that you can love someone into a capacity they have not yet earned. You cannot do his shadow work for him. You cannot cross the bridge of connection, pick him up, and carry him into his own emotional depths. The journey into the anima is a solitary walk. He must take those steps on his own 2 feet. When you finally accept his silence as pure data, everything shifts. The heavy burden of hope dissolves into the quiet peace of acceptance. You stop bleeding out your life force in the waiting room of someone else's evolution. You reclaim your energy. You realize that his silence was never a cage designed to trap you. It was a mirror showing you where you were refusing to accept reality. And in that acceptance, you find your absolute freedom. How do we navigate this vast, empty space? How do we stop bleeding out our life force in the waiting room of someone else's evolution? Insight alone is not enough to break the cycle. We must move from intellectual understanding into embodied, practical action. We must sever the invisible cords that keep us anchored to a ghost. There are 3 specific internal shifts you can make today. These are precise mental moves designed to pull you out of the void. They will call your fragmented spirit back into your own sovereign body. The first shift requires a radical surrender. You must stop translating nothing into something. When the unawakened counterpart says nothing, you must train your mind to hear exactly nothing. Do not write a tragic poetic script about his hidden, tortured longing. Do not write a villainous script about his calculated, malicious cruelty. You must let the silence remain exactly what it is. It is an absence of action. It is a blank page. The mind of the holder of space is a brilliant instrument. It is deeply capable of finding complex patterns in absolute chaos. But in this specific dynamic, Your intellectual brilliance is a trap. It keeps you tethered to an illusion. You weave tangled threads of meaning out of thin air. When you stop over-decoding his nothingness, a profound energetic shift occurs. You instantly reclaim all the quantum energy you have been projecting into his void. You stop fueling a one-sided connection. You pull your precious life force out of his shadow. You return it directly to your own bones. The second shift requires a change in your metrics. You must begin to measure him by his current capacity rather than his future potential. The spiritual path often traps us in a beautiful but highly dangerous habit. We see the eternal soul of the other person. We completely bypass the wounded human standing right in front of us. You may clearly see his divine nature. You may deeply feel the undeniable quantum entanglement between your hearts, but you are currently interacting with a human nervous system. That nervous system is entirely governed by fear. When you are deciding whether to reach out or to release him, you must ask yourself a grounding question. Am I speaking to the man who is actually here, or am I speaking to the phantom I desperately wish he would become? You must reach out only if you can do so without a hidden agenda. Reach out only if you absolutely do not need a response to stabilize your own nervous system. If his continued silence will crush your spirit, your message is not a gift of unconditional love. It is a covert demand for your own emotional regulation. In that state of deep depletion, the highest spiritual act is to release your grip entirely. The third shift is the ultimate reclamation. You must turn the mirror inward. If his silence is triggering an existential panic within your body, the dynamic is no longer about his behavior. The pain is pointing directly to your own unhealed shadow. You must ask yourself a difficult, highly analytical question. Why does your nervous system interpret another person's emotional limitation as a literal threat to your survival? The anxious heart unknowingly uses the avoidant soul as a mirror for its own inherent value. When he is present, you feel worthy. When he goes quiet, your mirror suddenly goes dark. You feel as though you cease to exist. This is the core wound demanding your immediate attention. Your task is to become your own permanent source of illumination. You must learn to hold space for your own grief. You must sit quietly with your own ancient abandonment wounds. You must offer yourself the exact same fierce, unwavering devotion you have been freely offering to a ghost. When you master these three internal shifts, the silence completely loses its power over you. It is no longer a heavy gravity pulling you under. It transforms from a weapon of rejection into a masterclass in profound self-liberation. You step out of the waiting room. You finally walk back into your own beautiful life. The silent masculine is not your enemy. He is a teacher, wrapped in the harsh, uncomfortable disguise of absence. He is teaching you the absolute limits of your control. He is teaching you the vital difference between a connection that requires you to shrink and a connection that allows you to breathe. You are a solvent, sophisticated, deeply feeling being. You have navigated the treacherous depths of your own psyche. You do not need to stand outside in the cold, begging for a place at a table where the host is too terrified to even pull out a chair. Let the silence wash over you, not as a judgment of your worth, but as a profound liberation. It is the sound of you being set free from a job you were never contracted to do. You cannot heal him. You can only witness him. And in witnessing him with absolute, unclouded clarity, you finally heal yourself. I will leave you with this final, lingering thought. Let it settle deep into your bones. If you stopped translating the void, if you laid down the heavy burden of hoping for a sudden metamorphosis, if you took his silence at absolute, unvarnished face value, until next time, stay anchored in your own truth.